Good morning, U.S. history students. Today we're going to be starting Unit 2. We're going to be learning about World War I. So these notes are 2.1, The Great War Begins. Your essential question, what caused World War I? So today is going to be kind of an overview of World War I. You did learn about it last year in your world history class, so this should just be a refresher just to get you back at that idea of World War I, what was happening, why it started, all of that. So in the United States, over the late 1800s, early 1900s, our president was President McKinley. We were involved in the Spanish American War, and we were led by our General Roosevelt at the time. This was Teddy Roosevelt. He led both the Rough Riders and the Buffalo Soldiers. So he led African American troops during the Spanish American War. African American troops have been fighting in our wars since the first war that we had when we had a Revolutionary War and declared our independence from England. The United States didn't end up winning this war. Spain lost, and so the United States gained the territories of Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. But President McKinley would be assassinated in 1901, so he was shot twice in the abdomen and he died 8 days later. Just a little fun fact for you, we have had 4 presidents that have been assassinated, that have been shot to death. Abraham Lincoln, James Garfield, William McKinley, and John F. Kennedy. All 4 of these presidents were shot on a Friday. So our next president after this would be Teddy Roosevelt, the Roosevelt administration, the first Roosevelt administration, I should say. Teddy Roosevelt believed that the United States should speak softly and carry a big stick. So that meant to always be prepared for any sort of military conflict that might come to us. After Roosevelt, we would have the Taft administration. President Taft, you might have heard of. There's a kid's book about him getting stuck in a bath. So President Taft here, that's why there's these pictures of him in the bath. Under his administration, we would pass the 16th Amendment, so we started collecting income taxes. And he believed in what he called dollar diplomacy. So that meant we should get involved in things that happen overseas in different countries if they interfere with our economic interests. But meanwhile, in Europe, there is trouble brewing. So we have alliances being formed. The Triple Alliance would be between Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary. They would become known as the Central Powers. The Triple Entente, France, Britain, and Russia would become known as the Allies. The United States will join this, but not until later on. So this map here sort of shows you the Allies in 1914, what the map looked like. We have Germany, Austria in the middle here. And then over here we have Italy, France, and Russia. So they're sort of surrounding Germany in the middle. So there was a lot of causes that started World War I. So a lot of conflict was happening between these countries in Europe because they were having conflict over the same territories. If you think back to world history, you learned about imperialism and how these European countries were going all over the world and were fighting to conquer and take lands from different groups that were already living there. This was known as imperialism. There was always also a lot of rise in the military. There was militarism at the time. They were glorifying the military, building up their military capacities. They had military parades like this through cities to try to get people to join. And the conflict really came to a head between Serbia and Austria. So the leader of Austria, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, he and his family went over to Serbia for a visit because they were planning on trying to take over the small nation of Serbia. So again, if you can see here, Austria-Hungary is this large nation here in the middle, and Serbia is a smaller nation right here. And so Austria-Hungary wanted to spread into Serbia and take over these lands. So while they were visiting, Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife, they had a parade. They were riding around in this convertible here, and they would be shot at. So this guy here, Gavrilo Princip, he assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand. He was a member of this group called the Black Hand, and they were nationalists. They didn't want Austria-Hungary coming into their small nation of Serbia and taking over. So Austria gives Serbia an ultimatum. They said, either you send us this man or we are going to declare war on you. Meanwhile, in Serbia, he did get arrested. He was captured immediately. He was arrested. He was facing trial. And when someone commits a crime in a country and they're from that country, usually it's handled within the country. But Austria wanted them to send Gavrilo Princip to Austria so that Austria could handle him there. Serbia refused, and Austria declares war. Now, Austria has allies, and so does Serbia. So Russia ends up joining the war right after Austria declares war because they are Serbia's ally. So as you can see, this tiny little orange country right here, very tiny, very small to see, that is Serbia. And this big green country here, that's Russia. So Russia comes to their aid, and they decide they're going to declare war on Austria. So while that single event may be known as the first event of the war or the straw that broke the camel's back, these are the four main causes of World War I. So the rise in military strength, the alliances that are formed between these countries, the imperialism that caused conflict between the countries in the first place, and nationalism. Everyone's having this intense patriotism and wants to fight for their nation. So because we have all these allies, the other countries start getting involved as well. So Germany is allies with Austria. So Germany here decides to join the war because they are allies with Austria. So Germany declares war on Russia. Germany also declares war on France because France is allies with Serbia and Russia. Germany and France have been having a conflict over the territory between their two countries for quite some time now anyway. They're both arguing over this territory. And so now that Germany is fighting a war and they're in the middle of two different countries, they have France on the left, they have Russia on the right, they decided they're going to go left first, they're going to wipe out France, and then they can turn around and just focus on fighting Russia, fighting a war on one front. But unfortunately, although they planned to just go left to take out France so they could focus on the big country of Russia, they were not very successful in that. Now, the United States did not join the war when the war first started. The war started in 1914, and the United States took a position of neutrality, which means that we were not going to take sides in the war. We stayed out of the war until 1917. President Wilson was dealing with many other conflicts within the United States and thought that we should not get involved in Europe's problems quite yet. So President Wilson was president in the United States from 1913 to 1921. He supported what he called moral diplomacy. So he said that we should only support countries around the world who have the same moral beliefs as we do in the United States. So he kept us out of the war for 3 years until 1917. Women were fighting for the right to vote at this time. As you can remember from our last unit, the suffragists were out there fighting and arguing in front of the White House saying that women should be able to have the right to vote. Under President Wilson's administration, we also had the conflict of lynchings. So in the United States, we had a rise in the KKK during this time. Actually, President Wilson showed the movie A Birth of a Nation, which is a KKK propaganda movie. He actually had a viewing of that in the White House. So the KKK was gaining a lot of steam during this time. We had over 500 lynchings during the Wilson administration, so during the years that he was in office as president. In 1910, we have a new group formed called the NAACP. This is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And they decided that they were going to use the court systems. They were going to start challenging these unjust Jim Crow laws that discriminated against African Americans. So they would form and they would continue to fight, and they still do to this day. And that is the end of our notes for today, so don't forget to write a summary, just a couple sentences about what you learned today.